Devin Graves here, coming to you once again from Studio D, this time with a short video on how to prepare your audio recording sessions to be mixed in another studio. The first thing you're going to need to do is be sure you do all of your editing, your tops and tails. I don't want to go too much into editing in this video because that's a whole other beast in and of itself. But basically what you want to do is you want to make sure there are no noises, clicks, mistakes, glitches, any sounds in the audio files that could end up in your mix. You're also going to want to print any of your VST instruments, any of your virtual instruments, synths, samples of any kind. Be sure to burn those to audio files. Do not leave them in MIDI. Also burn down your AmpSim files. If you're using AmpSims in real time in your mix, you want to burn that AmpSim down to a completely treated file. And you'll also want to retain your DI tracks, your direct ins from your guitars and your bass. You're going to want to just include that. Have your DIs right next to the guitar that is the DI to. In other words, if you have an amp or a sim recording, right below that have the DI recording. You can mute it. If there's a special effect that you want to be sure is in your mix, you don't know if the engineer is going to have this plug-in or it's just maybe something special you did, you can burn that effect track down onto a stereo audio file, locate it right next to the file that it is affecting. Make sure it's 100% wet and just burn it down, and that way it can be a fail-safe. The engineer can always mix it in just from your audio file. So now it's going to be time to consolidate the audio. I'm going to show you a file I did. This is a cover tune I did with Eric Clayton. This is David Bowie's Fame. And as you see, we have fuzz guitar, for example, and you can see these broken up regions here. Same with the vocals. You can see these are broken up regions. All the parts that we punched in, all the parts that we placed where they go, they're just these little desert islands unto themselves. You can also see a lot of edits here. It's kind of hard to see. If I zoomed in, you could see it. Let's go ahead and do that. If I zoom in, you can see that there's a bunch of edits here. And each of these would be exported as its own audio file and then designated to its own track. So if I were just to copy these audio files, drag them into another session, it wouldn't end up in this order. It would end up in a seemingly random alphabetic order. There would be a track for every single region or clip. So that's needless to say something we don't want. So if I look at this whole thing, now every DAW is going to consolidate your tracks in a different way. So if you don't know how to do it, look up a YouTube video on consolidating audio for your program, Logic, Cubase, Ableton, whatever it may be. I'm using Pro Tools here, and actually it's a very easy process in Pro Tools. So what we want is these separate regions to become one consolidated region that begins at the same start point and ends at the same end point, all of these tracks. In Pro Tools, what we do, we want to place it in grid mode so that we have a musical value to our starts and ends. We want to start at the end and even give ourselves some space for reverb tails. You can see these tracks end before my end point here. That's just to allow a little space at the end for breathing, for reverb tails. You would actually want to take time to listen to this space and make sure it's spaced well. Cymbal decay, reverb tails, echoes, delays, whatever it is that may be trailing after these audio files, you want to be sure and capture them. You also want to start before the audio files begin. If you begin where the audio files begin, you risk actually cutting off the transient and having a very awkward sounding beginning, very abrupt sounding beginning. So you want to buffer before the first audio waveform, I recommend 2 bars. Generally, that is 1 count for the drummer, 1 count for the band, then the music comes in, and then you should be good to go. So I have selected in this move all of my audio clips. Before I save these things, I actually want to do something really quick that's going to save me a little grief later. Right now you see the instrument is named for the track, which is fine. We actually want that. We want the instrument names on the files, but we need them numbered first. If they're not numbered, 01 kick, 02 kick, let's say kick mic 2, 03 snare, 04 snare bottom, 05 hi-hat, 06 ride, 07 tom 1, 08 tom 2, 09 tom 3, 10 tom 4, 11 overheads. Okay, now I'm going to stop here because I want to show you what's going to happen if this step isn't done. Normally you want to number these all the way down through a 2-digit number if your track count is less than 99. If you have more than 100, you'll need a 3-digit number. And this way, it's going to arrange things when you move them from this session to a folder. It's going to arrange them numerically. The number before the track name defaults to numerical order. If there is no number, it's going to default to alphabetic order, and that is going to scatter things all around in the session. It's going to take time for the engineer to put them where they need to be. So heed this. I won't continue any further because I think that the point is well taken. Now, I'm going to make sure I'm in grid mode. This is very important because you want your cuts to be at a musical value. That way, when you drag them into a session at the same time signature, everything's still going to be on bar, on beat. Now, in consolidating these audio files, every DAW has its own way of doing this. I used to do it in Logic by creating an object at the beginning and at the end, and then connecting those objects. And I had to do it for every track. With Pro Tools, it's a lot easier. I just select the entire range on this bar here. And I want to start out past the end of the last WAV file. I want to make sure I have room for any reverb tails or anything like that. So I'm just going to select it. Oopsie. I'm just going to select it. And then I'm going to bring it all the way to the beginning. Now, I always have 2 bars of silence before the music begins. The reason is if you have a click track, you have 1 bar for the drummer, 1 count bar for the band, and then it goes into music. You also want to be sure to have this buffer because if you start the song and consolidate it right from the very first note, you risk cutting off that initial transient, and that would give this really abrupt beginning. You do not want that. You want a little space before and certainly enough space after for reverb tails, cymbal decays, what have you. So now that I have them all selected, I am going to consolidate them. The edit menu down here to consolidate clips, and that's going to take a little while. You can see it's naming it 01 kick, and as far as I've numbered them down, it's going to number them, and then the rest you'll see they'll spill out alphabetically thereafter. Okay, so there you see it here. All these files. Let me grab this here. Now all the files are just one consolidated audio file. These here are MIDI regions. Those are actual MIDI notes. I have a couple tracks like that. There's a piano down here, and these are just the virtual drums. But we can import those into the session as well. That's a separate step. Right now we're dealing with the audio files. So, as it happens in Pro Tools, all these audio files are now already selected. You can see they're selected here in the window. Okay? You can see the tracks that I named that proceed with the number. you can see they were saved in that way as well with the number. Okay, now all these tracks currently selected, I'm going to go to my clips window and I'm going to export clips as files. Wave file, multiple mono. It's really important that you want to keep your mono tracks mono. There are different ways the different DAWs do this, and sometimes they send it through the mix bus, and then it will take a mono snare track, a mono guitar track, a mono bass track, and convert them all into stereo tracks. And that is a big problem when we come to mix, because the engineer then has to separate those tracks and delete one side. And that's a big headache nobody wants. So multiple mono, in this case, 24-bit, 48K. Now I'm going to choose where to save these. I've already prepared a folder that is on my drive here. It's called Fame Consolidated. Now I export those files to that folder. All right, now this has taken a while, so I skip to this part here. Now all these files have been copied to the folder. The one step I want to take now is I want to also export the MIDI. This is going to export these MIDI tracks here. It's also going to export all of the time signature, tempo changes, and sometimes you can even transfer over the song markers. But in this case, it's just set to multi-track because I have a few tracks. Just the default setting is going to work for me. I'm going to export that into the Fame Consolidated folder, 00 Fame MIDI. That way it'll put it at the very top. Now I'm going to go ahead and close this session. I'm not going to save it like this. I recommend you change the name to a new version like Consolidated before you save such a file, so you don't overwrite the unedited version. You might have to revert to it. You'll definitely want to drag these new files into a new session and just listen to it and make sure everything has exported correctly, because sometimes there could be problems and it just does it wrong. The audio engineer won't know that the keyboard is coming in, say, 4 beats too late. It just will wonder why it sounds so weird and wrong on the chord changes. So definitely take a proof listen to these audio files before you send them. And one thing you'll want to also do is drag the session file, if you're running whatever, Pro Tools or Logic or whatever, the actual consolidated version of the session file, drag that into this folder as well. If we look at it now, we're gonna look into this folder. It's on this drive here, and this is Fame Consolidated. And now look, you can see here 00 Fame MIDI, and then there's kick 1, 2, track 3, track 4, all the way hi-hat, tom, 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 overheads left and right, rooms, 12, 13 ambient mics, and now you see acoustic guitar, then bass, then Devon, because everything, then the Fames that Eric was singing, then the funk strat. You can see this is now all alphabetically, and that's the way it's going to pour into the next session. So definitely number all your tracks. You can either do it in the arrange window like I showed you before you consolidate, or once you've consolidated, you can just name each individual track at that point. But definitely do it before you export it or copy it to this folder. So that is it. The only thing I would do now is I would change the name Fame Consolidated. I'm going to rename this now. Let's say we're making an EP or an album, and this is the first song on the whole track list. You want to number your songs on the folder level, number them according to the running order on the track list, and it's also useful to put the BPM after the name. So I would do it like this. Say it's the first song, 01 Fame, 96.5 B BPM. And if I save it like that, without importing that MIDI file, I could just manually set up the session at the proper BPMs, and then all my delays will fall in line, my timeline will fall in line just by dragging everything in. So if I was doing an album or an EP and I had multiple songs, I would save each song in a folder just like I did this one, and then I would save all those folders in a master folder named for the band and the album title. And that is it. You have that master folder. That's what you're going to send off either to WeTransfer or Google Drive or hand delivered on a USB stick. However you're going to deliver this product, that master folder is what you will deliver. Inside will be all the subfolders that will have all the properly named and titled instrument tracks, the MIDI file, the session file for each song in each folder. Okay? So hopefully that saves you a lot of headache, it saves you a lot of money in mixing, and hopefully also it saves me the very same. So until the next one.